It started like any ordinary morning. A thin mist blanketed the sleepy town of Willowbrook. The sun was just beginning to stretch its golden fingers across the rooftops, and birds were barely waking. Inside a small wooden cottage at the edge of town, a kettle whistled softly. The fireplace crackled and a pair of slippers sat quietly on a woven rug. Then came the soft sound of paws padding across hardwood. Enter Max. Golden fur. Bright eyes, tail sweeping the floor like a paintbrush. He trotted to the kitchen, tail wagging. As if to say, "Good morning, old man," Henry chuckled. Right on time, a boy. Henry, mid-70s, silver hair like river frost, eyes that once saw battlefields and now searched only for peace. A man of few words, but deep heart. And Max's golden retriever was more than just a pet. He was Henry's shadow, his purpose, its only family. You see, Henry had rescued Max as a pup 6 years ago, just days after burying his beloved wife. Margaret, the house had gone silent back then. No laughter, no footsteps, no reason to get out of bed, till one rainy afternoon he'd found Max shivering in a corner of the local shelter. A tiny, trembling furball with eyes too big for his face. "I'll take him," Henry said. No hesitation. From that day on, they were inseparable. Mornings meant walks through foggy fields. Henry with a thermos of black coffee, Max darting through wildflowers. Afternoons were spent on the porch, Henry with his paints and canvas, Max lying beside him like a statue of loyalty. And every evening they'd stroll to the bakery, where Henry bought a single raisin scone and broke it in half one piece. For him, one for Max, the routine was sacred, predictable, comforting. Until that morning, Henry reached for his coffee just as he always did, but this time his fingers twitched. The mug slipped, shattered. He clutched his chest. His knees gave. Out. The world tilted. And then he collapsed. Max barked. A sharp, sudden alarm that shattered the stillness. He ran to Henry's side, licking his face, pawing at his arm, whimpering. Nothing. Henry was unconscious. Max's eyes darted toward the doggy door. Without another second's thought, he bolted. Out. He didn't know what to do, only that someone had to help. Anyone? He barked like his soul was on fire. He ran to the neighbor's porch. Then the next he howled at the sky, sprinted back to the road, and circled the house in a frenzy. Mrs. Delaney, the retired teacher across the street, opened her window. "Max, what on earth?" Then she saw the open door, the broken mug, Henry on the floor. She dialed 911 by the time the ambulance arrived. Red and blue lights reflecting off wet pavement, Max was already by Henry's side again, nudging his hand as EMTs rushed in. "Sir, can you hear me?" Henry groaned weakly. Max wagged his tail just once. As the EMTs lifted Henry onto a stretcher, Max tried to hop in. "Hold on, boy," one paramedic said, gently blocking him. "You can't come." Max winced. He didn't understand Henry. Was leaving, the man who never left his side, was being taken away. The doors slammed shut. The siren wailed. And Max stood there, frozen in the driveway, staring after the van that carried his best friend into the unknown. That's when something shifted. Max didn't go back inside. He didn't return to his bed or his bowl or the warm fireplace where he'd always waited before. No, he ran down the road, past familiar fences and curious onlookers, straight toward the place the ambulance had gone nose to the ground. Heart in his throat, paws pounding like drums on wet asphalt. And as the sky opened up and rain began to fall, Max ran faster, because something deep inside told him. This time, Henry needed him more than ever. It was still raining when Max reached the hospital, his fur soaked. Paws muddy, tongue hanging out in exhaustion, but he didn't care. His eyes were locked on the glowing doors of Willowbrook Regional. He had followed the flashing lights, sniffed every turn, sprinted across town with a single mission beating in his chest. Find Henry. Cars passed. People stared, but Max didn't slow down. He reached the sliding doors and barked loud, sharp, desperate. He tried to enter, but the glass wouldn't open for 4 legs and a furry face. He paced. Barked again. A security guard stepped outside. Whoa! Hey there, buddy. This isn't a kennel. Max growled, not in anger, but frustration. His tail wagged, his eyes wide, soaked fur clinging to his body. He tried to push past the man. The guard knelt. You with someone? Then the nurse stepped out. Claire. She'd seen Max earlier just once, in the ER bay. Wait, she said, walking over, wiping her hands on her scrubs. I think this is the dog. The man in room 204, the one who collapsed at home, his name was Henry. This dog was with him. Really? The guard asked. Yeah, I remember. The paramedics mentioning it. Claire crouched down. Hey, Max, that's your name, right? Max leaned into her touch, letting out a quiet whimper. Then he sat, right there in the rain. Eyes locked on the hospital doors, waiting for the man who never left without him. Claire frowned. We can't let him in, can we? The guard shook his head, policy still. He's not leaving, is he? Max didn't move. Hours passed, the sun dipped behind clouds. The rain stopped, but the ground stayed wet and cold. Max stayed. Nurses came and went. A delivery guy dropped off dinner. Someone from the janitorial staff gave Max half a sandwich. A child leaving the pediatric wing pressed a hand against the glass, waving. Max didn't react. His eyes never left. The front doors dot inside. Henry lay unconscious, hooked up to wires and machines that beeped steadily. His heart was fighting to keep rhythm, his body weak. But his mind, it drifted. Through dreams, through fog, and in every dream, Max was there. By midnight, Max was curled beneath the overhang, resting his head on his paws, not sleeping, just watching, listening. Claire stepped out again, a blanket in her arms. I knew you'd still be here, she whispered. Here, let's make you a little more comfortable. She laid the blanket down. Max didn't budge until she gently guided him onto it. She brought a small bowl of water. Piece of bread. He barely touched it. He just waited. Day 2, the hospital buzzed with life. Nurses changed shifts. Coffee cups were refilled. The cafeteria opened, and outside, still in the exact same spot, sat like a statue of loyalty. He's still here, someone asked. Yup, said Ramon, the morning security guard. Didn't move all night. Crazy. Not crazy. Claire chimed in, passing by. Just loyal. Word began to spread. Visitors snapped photos. A few staff brought him treats. Someone even called the local paper. Dog waits outside. Hospital for owner, the headline would read, but Max didn't care about headlines. Only Henry. Inside room 204. Henry stirred. Slow, weak, but alive. He blinked up at the ceiling, confused. Tubes, monitors, machines. He tried to speak, but COULDN single quotes T. Claire entered. Mr. Henry, you're awake. He managed to whisper. Where? Max? Claire paused, then smiled. Still here? Right outside. Hasn't left once. Henry's eyes filled with tears. He nodded slowly. Good boy. By evening of day 3, the staff had come to expect Max. Children drew pictures of him in the waiting room. Nurses called him Dr. Max. Doctors made jokes about promoting him to security. Even the grumpy administrator sighed, fine, let the dog stay outside. But Max still wouldn't eat much, wouldn't rest. Wouldn't wag, not until he saw Henry. That was the rule, and everyone was starting to understand. On the morning of day 5, Claire came outside with something in her hand, a blue vest, labeled Therapy Volunteer Visitor Pass. Hey, Max, she said softly, kneeling. He looked up, ears perked, head tilting. Want to come in? His tail wagged once, then twice. Claire slipped the vest over him. Technically, I'm bending a few rules. But I think we can make an exception. Max stood. He didn't bark, didn't jump. He just walked beside her, head high, focused through the sliding glass doors, past the front desk, down the long hallway, his nails clicking softly on the tile floor. Every nurse turned, every patient smiled. Some whispered, some clapped. But Max didn't look at any of them. He was locked in room 204. Claire opened the door, and Max rushed in. Henry sat up weakly, Ivy still in his arm. His eyes found Max and everything else disappeared. Max. Max leaped onto the bed, gently pressing his head to Henry's chest. His tail thumped rhythmically. Henry wept. Good boy, you waited. Max licked his face, nuzzled close, and didn't move, neither did Henry. For the first time in days, his heart monitor steadied not out of medication. But reunion. The room fell silent except for the rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor. Max lay across Henry's chest, still as stone, except for the gentle rise and fall of his breathing. His fur, once soaked and matted from the rain, now warmed by Henry's touch. Henry's weak fingers moved slowly through Max's golden coat, his voice barely a whisper. You waited for me, didn't you, boy? Max nudged Henry's chin softly. Claire stood at the doorway, hand over her mouth, eyes misty. The moment wasn't just emotional, it was sacred. Two souls reunited after days of uncertainty, fear, and distance. No words, no doctors, no machines could do what Max had just done. Henry's blood pressure stabilized, his breathing slowed, his heart monitor calmed. The doctors called it a coincidence. The nurses called it a miracle. But Max, he didn't care what they called it. All he knew was Henry was alive and they were together again. From that moment, the hospital made an exception. Just this once, Max was given a folded blanket beside Henry's bed. Claire brought in a proper dog bowl. One of the surgeons brought dog treats from home. Max didn't leave the room, not for food, not for sleep. Not even when other staff tried to coax him out for a short walk. He'd only been apart from Henry. For 5 days, he wasn't taking another chance. Every morning, Max rose with the first beep of the morning vitals check. He watched each nurse that entered the room, following their every move with quiet alertness. He only relaxed when Henry did at lunch. Henry would feed him bites of bread from his hospital tray. Even though Claire warned, hospital food's bad enough for people, Max. At night, Max would curl up right beside the hospital bed, resting his head on the corner of Henry's pillow. Henry, now strong enough to whisper, would say the same thing every evening. Still here, huh, Max? And Max would wag his tail once. The days passed, and slowly Henry got better. The doctors reduced his medications. His chest pain faded. The color returned to his cheeks. And every person who passed room 204 saw the same scene. A man recovering. And a dog who never left his side. On the 6th morning, Henry tried to sit up fully. Max jumped off the bed and stood in front of him, tail wagging, eyes bright. Think I'm ready to stand, Henry said to Claire. You sure? She asked. I've got a nurse, he said with a grin, nodding to Max. They tried it together. Henry's hand gripped the walker. Max stood beside him like a 4-legged crutch, every muscle alert. Step by step, they moved slowly across the room. Max didn't rush. He matched Henry's pace exactly, turning when he turned, pausing when he paused. When Henry stumbled slightly, Max pressed into his side. Helping him balance, Claire watched from the doorway, whispering under her breath that dog's doing more therapy than I ever could. Later that day, they moved Henry into a chair by Nate Toe, like the window. The sun poured in, lighting the dust motes in the air. Henry looked out over the parking lot, then down at Max, who was curled on his feet. You didn't give up on me, said softly. Max blinked up at him. And I won't give up either. By the end of the week, word had spread. Max's story made it onto a local news segment. Golden Retriever waits 5 days outside hospital for owner. A photo showed Max, drenched in rain, lying outside the emergency room doors. But the photo didn't show the whole story. It didn't show the quiet moments, the the way Max watched every breath Henry took. The way he'd bark gently when nurses came too close, then relax once he recognized their faces. The way he'd sleep with one paw always touching Henry's blanket, as if to say, "I'm here. I'm not leaving again." Max didn't need a headline, he didn't need applause, he just needed Henry. On the 10th day, the doctor entered the room with a smile. "We've got good news. You're going home, Mr. Shaw." Henry raised a tired eyebrow. The doctor grinned. "Yes, I assume Max isn't staying behind." Claire came in with a cart of discharge papers, a wheelchair, and a bag of Henry's belongings. Max was already standing, tail thumping like a drumbeat. They wheeled Henry through the hallway, Max trotting. Beside him, proudly volunteer vest still strapped to his chest. The same nurses who had watched Max wait outside now lined the corridor, waving and clapping as the pair passed. When they reached the front doors, Henry looked down at Max and whispered, "Ready to go home, boy?" Max let out a soft bark. They rolled through the doors together side by side. It's just like they'd always been, and for the first time in 11 days. Max looked away from the hospital doors. He never looked back. The wheels of the taxi crunched. On the gravel driveway, Max leaped out first, tail wagging like a flag, spinning in circles. Henry stepped out slowly, cane in hand, every movement deliberate. The wooden cottage stood just as they had left it, quiet, still, waiting. Max dashed to the porch, then stopped, turning to check on Henry. Henry smiled, still the fastest one. "Huh." With effort, he climbed the steps. Max waited until the screen door creaked open and the familiar scent of home greeted them both. Inside, everything was just as they remembered. The painting easel stood in the corner, untouched. Henry's slippers were still by the fire, and Max's bed, tucked beneath a window, looked as though it had missed him. Henry lowered himself into his armchair with a quiet groan, then patted the spot beside him. Max jumped up without hesitation. Silence fell between them, but it wasn't empty. It was peaceful. The kind of silence only best friends could share. Henry reached down, brushing his fingers through Max's fur. "You kept me alive. You know that?" Max looked up at him, eyes soft, steady. Days passed. Recovery was slow, but Max was there for every moment. He followed Henry through each stumble and step. He barked when the alarm rang for medicine. He sat patiently during home nurse visits. When Henry grew frustrated with how slow he was healing, Max nudged his hand, sat beside him, and waited out the storm. Every evening they returned to their porch. Henry with his paints, Max curled at his feet. And for the first time in weeks, Henry picked up a brush. He didn't paint a landscape. He didn't paint the cottage. He painted. Max waiting alone outside the hospital doors, rain pouring down around him, but eyes filled with hope. It was a portrait of loyalty, of love, and it was the best thing Henry had ever painted. One morning, weeks after they'd returned home, Max stood at the door, leash in mouth. Henry raised an eyebrow. "You want to go to town?" Max wagged once. Henry chuckled. "All right then." They took the long route, the one with the wildflowers. Max ran ahead, circled back, waited. Henry walked slower but steadier now. Every step felt earned. When they reached the bakery, the bell above the door chimed just as it used to. The owner looked up and gasped. "Henry!" She rushed over, wiping flour from her hands. "We heard everything. That dog of yours? He's a hero." Henry smiled. He always was. She handed over a raisin scone. Henry broke it in half. One piece for him. One for Max. Nothing had changed, but everything had. From that day forward, Max was known around town. Not just as Henry's dog, but as the dog. The one who waited. The one who didn't give up. Children came to pet him. Strangers asked for photos. But Max didn't care about the attention. He only had eyes for Henry. One evening, later, Henry stood at the window watching the sunset paint the sky. Max lay beside him, chin on his. Paws, tail flicking slowly. "You know," Henry said softly, "I used to wonder if I had anything left after Margaret died. I thought I was finished, but then you showed up." Max looked up, ears twitching. "You brought me back." Henry lowered himself to the floor, ignoring the stiffness in his knees. He wrapped both arms around Max, pulling him close. "I'm not afraid anymore. Not of anything." Max leaned into the hug, heart beating with his. That night, Max slept on Henry's bed, something he never did before. He curled tight against Henry's side, his head resting on the old man's chest. It was quiet, peaceful, and the stars blinked. Gently through the window, morning came slowly. Birds chirped. Light spilled across the blanket. Max stretched, blinked, and nuzzled Henry's arm. But Henry didn't move. Max waited, listened. Stillness. He licked Henry's hand, still no movement. The silence grew heavier. Max let out a soft whine, then another. And then he did what he always did. He stayed. He didn't bark, didn't panic. He simply lay beside Henry, resting his head on his chest as he had in the hospital, as he had all his life, because even now, especially now, he would not leave. His side. Hours passed before the nurse found them. Henry had passed peacefully in his sleep, and Max was still there. A few weeks later, townsfolk gathered on the porch of Henry's home. The easel stood outside, holding the painting of Max in the rain. A plaque had been added beneath it. To Max, the dog who waited, the friend who never left. Claire, the nurse from the hospital, adopted him. She never tried to replace Henry. She just gave Max what he needed: a quiet home, gentle hands, space beside her bed. Sometimes Max would stand by the door, leash in his mouth, waiting. Other times he'd lie beside Henry's old armchair, staring quietly at the fire. But every night before curling up to sleep, he would look out the window toward the stars, as if he still saw Henry walking just ahead of him, waiting for Max to catch up.